All right, welcome back to The Hill. Did you see this over the weekend? Pro-Palestinian protesters took their fight straight to the president's doorstep, with tens of thousands descending upon the White House to demonstrate. Now, this morning, even at one point, physically shaking the gates of the White House. This is in front of the White House, and those are the big barriers. This morning, in the aftermath of the protest, the images remaining from the pro-Palestine graffiti and red handprints on a White House entry and on nearby monuments. This is Lafayette Park to the north side of the White House, public park. Anyone can go there, but what we saw on Saturday, I think, was a different level, shaking the gates. Kara.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I mean, to me, this evinces the two-tiered justice system, right? We've seen mobs get out of control before, and they've put the full force of the weight of the Biden administration and the Department of Justice against those people. Why aren't they doing that now? Bloody, fake blood handprints shaking the gates of the White House, as you said. That, to me, is very,
it that, or does it show the
aggressive.
Democratic divide?
Well, I think both, too. And that is what is so puzzling to me, right? Because this is something that Americans should be able to unite behind, not just because of what happened to Israel, but what happened to Americans. I've said this before. 33 Americans killed. You have bases in eastern Syria attacked by proxies. You've got U.S. bases in Iraq attacked. You've got intercepts of Yemeni cruise missiles in the Red Sea. This right now is enveloping the Western world, not to mention in the digital sphere, too. So this is a U.S. issue.
You see this, Johanna, at the steps of at the gate of the White House. Yeah. Democratic staffers, about 20% of them, according to Axios, calling on asking the DNC to have the president call for a ceasefire. Then you have President Obama, quote unquote, nobody's hands are clean.
And I was there for that speech. First, I want to say Bernie Sanders has actually said ceasefire is probably not an option. And I think that President Obama was very reflective in this moment. He was talking about what could we have done differently. And I can assure everyone, if there was a two-state solution to be had, Barack Obama would have wanted that two-state solution. And when I see young people with these Free Palestine signs, I don't think they have all the information. Because I'm sorry, but if you go there right now, I care so much about that child who wants to dream big dreams. But if we free Palestine, what is the solution? I mean, I went to Ramallah with President Obama, and there was not a government that could take over, and a government that would care about LGBTQ rights, that would care about women's rights, that would care about human rights. I didn't see that. So I'd love to know what the solution is. And that was actually the bigger context that I appreciated of President Obama, is he was saying, if we want to look at the solution, let's look at the years of all of the emotions here. Let's remove ourselves from this. And I'm sorry, but when people are going to the White House and saying free Palestine without an actual solution, that's not helpful.
No, they have a solution, and it's from the river to the sea, the eradication of Israel. They're chanting it over and over
they
again.
Don't understand this. That's the problem.
I think they do.
No, I'm sorry. Some people do. It's a small percentage of people who were found out on social media that they were doing this event that they thought was for the children who are under fire because there's a war going on.
Real quick, Chris, does it show the pickle that the president is in right now with his party?
I think that this helps probably Biden because the reprehensible behavior of these people and their wretched conduct, the hooliganism of going around D.C., defacing buildings, trying to be a mob. I do not think brings anybody to the side of the Palestinian question, and I think helps Biden because it becomes clear that the people who are the most adamant about this are not civil, are not willing to participate. So I think this is probably as a reverse bank shot probably helps Biden because it generates sympathy.
Thank you for watching, and make sure you go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.